First thing to recognize is that you think you know your product, right? Whether it's a web service or maybe it's a piece of hardware or whatever it is, maybe it's an application. You think you know it and you think it's the same. But every new culture or market that you bring this product into is going to view it in an entirely different way. They are going to see it differently. It's going to solve different problems for the users there. And the adoption pattern and the usage pattern is probably going to look very different. Even between countries like, like we said earlier, Canada, United States, they're close to proximity and so on, but the way people look at things and use things is very different. Same thing with Japan, obviously. When we brought Spotify here, the use cases and the places where people would use the application or the value that they would see it is entirely different from the way people used it in Sweden and so on. And it's not just a matter of maturity, right? Because you can say, well, obviously, because Sweden is the place where Spotify was born, right? It's been around for over a decade. People have gotten used to it. It's like paying your water, or sewage bill, whatever. It's like just something that you do. Yeah, you're like a utility. But it's not just about that, right? It's obviously maturity plays into it, but it's also when you see this adoption starting to take off, even at the very, very early stage, it comes from a different place. It's viewed in a different manner. On top of that, you also have this idea that when we launched in Sweden, it was at the height of piracy, right? Whereas when we launched in Japan, obviously piracy had pretty much gone away from a lot of markets, right? And in Japan, it was never really that big to begin with. So the problem that it solves is different, not just because it's a different market, a different culture, a different audience, but also because it's a different time, oftentimes. And I think that kind of realization, first of all, step back and assume that you're bringing something into the market where you cannot count on a product market fit, even though you think you know your product really well and you think it's going to be awesome. Obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be. You didn't have the belief, you wouldn't be. But start there, right? And then look at when you actually introduce this into this audience, what happens? How do they perceive it? How do they use it? Because you can imagine that there are problems that this group of people want to solve, right? But it might not be at all what they actually do with your product. Right? It might fit a completely different use case or issue